Kim, since you're going to talk about data bias, why don't we dive into that and then we'll take more questions at the end. Yeah?
Yep, sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, so I just want to start by showing some of the survey results. And these are the results that we captured before this talk. So it's not necessarily including everyone who took the survey earlier in this talk, but this was specifically a series of questions asking about people's experience with algorithms and data bias, and how often people use AI machine learning in their systems. So I'll try to just kind of cover some high level things. So if I kind of group the very frequently and frequently groups together, I'm going to say like, people are answering yes, emphatically yes to these questions. And if you look at this, then about 40% of the respondents are frequently using AI and machine learning algorithms. Of those, 35% said that they frequently use unfamiliar algorithms in their projects. And when you look at the third one is showing how often do your teams work to obtain a full understanding of how these algorithms work and are able to predict outcomes. I was very encouraged to see, over half of people responded very positively to this, which warms my heart because, as you're going to hear, in my opinion, that's one of the most important things you can do. And the last question, they're just asking how many teams treat algorithms as a black box. And I found that's pretty few, which is also very encouraging. I think some of the bar chart at the bottom is then asking, how do you and your team consider the appropriate use of data within projects? And I won't read all of these, but just kind of jumping down to the question, evaluating data to identify potential biases. About a third of respondents said, yep, that's an appropriate use of data. And about the same amount said, plan for ongoing measurement and monitoring of data ethics issues. And I'm calling these out because these are kind of going to be the focus of the next few set of slides that I'm showing to discuss algorithm bias, what these problems are, why they are all too common, and just throw out some ideas about how you can start thinking about ways to address them within your design process. Next slide. Okay. So first, a definition of what algorithmic bias is. So this refers to systematic, repeatable errors in AI that can create unfair outcomes. And more often than not, these unfair outcomes disproportionately affect the most vulnerable communities who have historically experienced biased and unfair treatment. Where they come from. So the term algorithmic bias can throw people off because really, it's really talking about the entire system. So they could come from pre-existing institutional expectations. So long before AI was even used, businesses were collecting data, analyzing that data, and using that data to make decisions about outcomes. So who were they going to approve mortgage loans to? As I'll talk about extensively on the next slide, the way that those decisions were captured have actually greatly affected the propagation of basically making the same decisions, only use fancy algorithms to get to that answer. And this is because bias is largely propagated from data quality issues. By far, this is the most important thing that you can do as an organization to start to address how bias can creep up in your system. Also included in that is the choice of algorithms that you use and how you optimize the model performance, which I'll touch on as well. And also the deployment use. If you end up deploying an AI solution kind of outside of the context of the scope it was originally intended for, then you're basically making an inference that was never intended to make. And this is another way in which an algorithm can end up creating unfair outcomes that were maybe not anticipated. I think that John's question was really timely and important. So just to repeat what John wrote in the chat, bias elimination is ultimately impossible, as bias is an essential part of human perception. Couldn't agree more. It's people who are on solutions teams. It's people who collect, curate, clean data. It's people who build, evaluate, and implement models, and it's people who deploy and operate them. AI systems, in and of itself, math isn't really biased. Statistics aren't really biased, and the computer programs, the software, is not really biased, but AI systems have a way of reinforcing the biases that we put into them, and can really exacerbate inequalities, not just reinforce them, but make them even worse than they were before.